I declare open this public hearing of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Public Works for the inquiry into Airservices Australia PFAS remediation of the former fire training ground at Rockhampton Airport, Queensland. The committee's role, as defined in the Public Works Committee Act 1969, is to consider and report on the purpose and need for the proposed works, the most effective use of public money that can be made in carrying out the works, and the present and prospective public value of the proposed works. In accordance with the Committee's resolution of 31st of July 2025, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I also remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. I'm Tony Zappia, the Chair of the committee, and I'll ask my two colleagues to introduce themselves as well.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Wilcox, Deputy Chair and Member for Dawson.
Thanks, Chair. Senator Josh Daliga for Tasmania.
Thank you. I'm not sure if we've got any other members that are coming online, but they may well do, and if they do, we'll certainly advise who they are. I remind members participating via chorus call to give their name each time they speak to assist witnesses and Hansard. Members and participants are reminded not to take another call and put their phones on hold during the teleconference, as this may cause interference with the teleconference. I now welcome Ms Chris Starsh, who is appearing via telephone to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee? Mr Starsh, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. My name is Christine Beatrix Stash, and I'm appearing as a public citizen.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. Ms Stash, I now invite you to make a brief opening statement before we proceed to a discussion.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to represent myself and the landholders and private citizens of Pink Lily. I own a property located at 94 Edwards Road, Pink Lily, which shares a common boundary with the Rockhampton Airport. The old fire training site was located at the back of my property, off to the right-hand corner of my back boundary. My back boundary is on the far side of Lion Creek that flows through my property and under the airport and then flows into the Fitzroy River. I purchased the property in February 2006 and lived there until August 2023. The property is currently tenanted pending the sale of this property. I relocated to Far North Queensland in September 2023 as part of my retirement strategy and plan to buy a new property when this property was sold. My property is a 16-acre farm with irrigation. It has a bore with a 5 meg annual water allocation. Over the years, I have run livestock on the property and have irrigated the pastures with the water from the bore. This water was also partially used in my household for non-drinking purposes only. I was contacted by Airservices Australia in approximately January 2024, stating that they suspected my property had been contaminated with PFAS that had leached from the fire training site. They asked could they run tests on the water and the soil at that time. As I had tenants living on the property, I felt obligated to get the test done so that they were fully informed as well and that they did not continue to use the water. At this time, I advised Airservices Australia of my plans to sell the property in the near future and my concerns that the report would devalue my property. The tests were completed in March 2024 and confirmed that my property and water had varying levels of PFAS contamination that had leached from the said site. A copy of this report can be provided if needed. They proposed changes to my water and tanks and offered to provide household water, which was carried out at that time. I conducted a private valuation on my property in August 2024 and got the valuer to do a report to show the value with and without the PFAS report to get an understanding of the true value of the property and how much the contamination had affected the saleable value of the property. This report is also available if required, but indicated that it had devalued the sale price of my property by approximately $400,000. I think it is extremely important that the site is remediated as soon as possible, and if this had been done sooner, my property may not have been affected. It is highly important to prevent any further contamination to all surrounding properties. The fact that the site is also located on floodplain makes it an even higher priority. In the time that I lived on the property, there have been 4 floods, namely in 2011, 2013, 2015 and in 2017. And that site would have been completely covered by the flood waters in all of these events. I don't think that the residents in the greater area, the local residents and even in the greater area of Rockhampton have been made aware of this issue. And it is important that they are also made aware of the situation and given the facts. If I had been informed earlier, I'm certain that I would have made a huge difference in how I use the water and land, or even made the decision to relocate at that time. I have also had my children and grandchildren live with me for varying amounts of time in the property, and am now concerned for any future health issues that being to the chemical may cause them. I feel, as well as considering the remediation of the contaminated site, that consideration be given to myself and the other affected landholders. Aside from the loss of the value of our properties, there are also ongoing health issues, including any mental stress that this has put us under. For me personally, I may have to abandon my retirement plans and move back onto my property to live, as I now do not have enough value in my property if I sell it to purchase a new home in Far North Queensland. And given the levels of contamination on my property, this is not ideal. So thank you again for the opportunity to share my story, and I hope that a suitable outcome can be reached for all concerned.
Mrs. Stosh, thank you very much for that opening statement, and I think the committee fully appreciates and understands the concerns that you raise and the importance of the issues that you have referred to. Look, I've just got a couple of very basic questions that I'll kick off with, if you can answer them at all. You talked about the fact that your property is devalued, but you also, if the remediation takes place, have you had any advice as to what effect that will have on the value of your property?
No, not at all.
Okay. And the other issue, you referred to the future health effects on your children and grandchildren. To date, to the best of your knowledge, has there been any health effects?
Not that I'm aware of. So, yeah. But, you know, and that's hard to determine.
Yeah, no,
I've spoken to medical doctors, and it's hard to determine whether it comes from PFAS or from something else. So,
yeah, no, that's a very fair comment. Okay, I'm going to hand over to the Deputy, Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your evidence, Ms. Stash. Could I just ask, when you said your property was devalued for $400,000, was that $400,000 taken from an interim valuation or purchase price? Could I ask what the purchase price of the property was?
the purchase price back in 2006 was $282,000.
Yep.
So I got an independent valuer who valued the property as it is in current market as at August 2024. And they valued that at $610,000 at that particular time. And with the PFAS report, they felt that it was worth only about $215,000.
Okay. So if it was in situ without the PFAS issue, the valuer said it was 610,000, and because of the report, it was 215. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And just for the record, so what would success look like to you? Thank you for your evidence. What would you like to see happen from here?
Oh, well, I'd certainly like to see the contamination site remediated so that it doesn't continue to leach onto my property.
Yep.
How they're going to, I mean, obviously it's leached onto other properties in the area that, you know, may not have even been aware of the situation, and certainly I don't think anyone else had a report, and any of my neighbours that I spoke to about getting the report done didn't want to do the report because it would devalue their property. So, you know, success is getting rid of the contamination, but that doesn't remove the contamination that is now already on our property.
Okay, so number one is to remediate the site. And do you have anything else for number two?
Well, I think that the landholders that have already been affected from this need to be compensated.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Wilcox. Senator, do you have any questions?
Thanks very much, Mr.
I
Ash.
should advise, sorry, Senator, I should advise that Mr David Smith is also on the line.
Thanks, Mr. Ash. I just wanted to ask, were you in the report? What was the level of contamination of your property?
There are varying amounts on, you know, where they tested the water from, whether it was in the bore, whether it was in the taps, whether it was in the soil. So there's varying levels for different areas. The report's quite intensive, so I can't off the top of my head remember it. But my daughter is live in the hearing and has a report there today.
So obviously there are degrees of contamination which obviously need to be removed, and as part of the works that Airservices are asking for funding, you know, to remediate the site. Is your property, to your knowledge, contaminated anywhere near the level that is required for remediation, as per the site at the airport?
Not being an expert in what levels require remediation, I can't honestly answer that, but the fact that the contamination is on my property at any level affects the value of my property and causes health concerns for anyone living there. We've been advised that the water should not be consumed for any human consumption, not to feed it to fowls that you're collecting eggs from. You can't use it to grow vegetables. At this stage, we've been advised that you can still continue to use it for water for livestock, but that's only because there's no regulation around the levels that livestock can drink at this stage. But that's not to say that that's not going to change in the future as well.
No worries. Thanks, Chair. That's all.
Thank you. Mr Smith, are you on the line and can you hear us?
Yes, Chair, I'm on the line.
Did you have any questions, David?
No questions from me, Chair.
Thank you. Mr Stash, thank you very much for your submission to the committee. I don't have any other specific questions that I need to ask at this point in time. Is there anything else that you want to bring to the committee's attention before we wrap it up?
No, I think I've said, in my statement, I think I said what I needed to say.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for appearing before the committee and for giving us some personal insight into how the contamination has affected your property. We'll be going through the rest of the process with the committee's hearing and then making recommendations to the Parliament. So I do thank you for your participation in today's hearing. If we do have any further questions, we may put them to you in writing in the future if something comes up in respect to your concerns. And you will also be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence to the committee today. If you feel you need to change any of your remarks in any way, please contact the Secretariat and advise them of the changes that you need to make. With that, once again, thank you, and I'll end our part of the committee hearing with yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I now welcome representatives of Airservices Australia to give evidence. For the Hansard record, once you've taken your place at the table, would you please each state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Good morning, committee. James Comley, PFAS Technical Lead with Airservices Australia.
Good morning, committee. Mrs. Michelle Peterson, Chief Aerodromes Officer.
Good morning, committee. Mark Page, Program Director of ARF NextGen.
Thank you. Although the committee doesn't require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. I now invite you to make a brief introductory remark or remarks before we proceed to questions.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today and would like to make a brief opening statement. We are happy to table this statement for the committee's consideration. I will begin by providing the committee with information about who we are and what we do. Airservices Australia is a government-owned organisation funded by the aviation industry. We deliver 3 essential services that underpin the safety and efficiency of Australia's aviation sector: air traffic management, aviation rescue firefighting services or ARFs, and air navigation support. Our ARFs operate at 27 of Australia's busiest airports, providing rapid emergency response capabilities to protect both lives and property. We employ more than 900 firefighters and operational ARF personnel, and we respond to over 4,000 emergency assistant requests annually. The primary function of our fire service is to rescue people and property from an aircraft crash or fire and to control, extinguish and protect people and property from a fire on aerodrome. Airservices operates commercially on a fee-for-service basis and receives no funding from the government. We are seeking the committee's support for the specific submission, major works approval for the PFAS remediation of the former fire training ground at Rockhampton Airport, Queensland. This decommissioned facility contains PFAS-impacted material, including infrastructure and soil, which we intend to remove and remediate. The site is a non-operational area of the airport. The removal and remediation of works will not impact or affect the operation of the airport. Airservices holds the lease for this site, and we have worked closely with the airport owner, Rockhampton City or Regional Council, to develop a remediation plan. Airservices has also worked closely with state regulatory agencies, including the Queensland Department of Environment, Tourism, Science and Innovation, Queensland Health and the Department of Primary Industries to conduct our PFAS investigation at Rockhampton Airport and to develop the proposed remediation. For context, PFAS are a group of human-made chemicals used for a range of industrial and domestic applications, including stain and water protection, metal plating, medical devices, and they were also used in firefighting foams. In the past, the firefighting foams containing PFAS were used by Airservices and other firefighting organisations due to their effectiveness in fighting liquid fuel fires. When Airservices became aware of the potential environmental impacts of PFAS in the early 2000s, we transitioned away from PFAS-containing foams. Airservices has been using PFAS-free foams at civilian airports, including Rockhampton, since 2010. Whilst we have not used those foams since 2010, the historical use of PFAS-containing firefighting foams has left legacy contamination at the Rockhampton Airport former fire training ground. Remediation forms part of Airservices' national PFAS investigation program on our airport-leased areas and their immediate surrounds to determine the presence of PFAS and to inform ongoing management actions and remediation requirements. Sampling conducted during Airservices Commission studies identified PFAS in soil, sediment, surface water and groundwater at and associated with the former fire training ground at Rockhampton Airport. Based on these results and consistent with national guidance documents relating to developing risk-based remediation strategies, Airservices has proactively identified the former fire training ground site for remediation with the objective of significantly reducing the overall PFAS footprint on the site. The proposed remedial actions are voluntary and are not subject to any regulatory order. International and Australian experience has shown the most effective management of PFAS contamination, including prevention of potential migration, is the remediation of the residual source. The remediation of the former fire training ground has the primary objective of removing PFAS source material from the site, thereby reducing the overall PFAS footprint and mitigation risk. The works will remove an estimated 90% of the remaining PFAS mass at the former fire training ground, with this material being lawfully disposed off-site at licensed facilities. The effectiveness of the remediation in achieving these objectives will be assessed through a validation and monitoring program developed in parallel with the Remediation Action Plan. We have asked for the committee to consider a request for concurrent documentation for this project. This will enable us to undertake remediation works during the 2026 dry season in Rockhampton, mitigating potential seasonal weather risks. In conclusion, this is a significant opportunity to reduce overall PFAS exposure and improve environmental outcomes. We welcome the committee's questions.
Mrs. Peterson, thank you very much for that opening statement, and thank you to yourself and the team yesterday for the briefing you provided the committee and the inspection that we were able to participate in, which was very, very useful. So thank you for that. I do have some questions, and I'll then hand over to the Deputy Chair and my other colleagues. But I'm going to start with this question. Given that PFAS was used at several airports, how does the Rockhampton contamination compare with that at other airports? Is it about the same from the testing that's been done, or is it worse? And in particular, given that Mrs. Stash that we just heard from, and you would have heard her evidence, talked about 4 floods in 11, 13, 15 and 2017, which I suspect is almost unique, that I'm not sure that every airport would have been flooded like that. Has that impacted the area here at Rockhampton more so than other places?
I'll hand to Mr. James Comley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for your question. If I can deal with your question in 2 parts.
Yep.
So I think the first part of your question was, how does Rockhampton sit on the scale of other airports? It is comparable with PFAS impacts at some of our other sites. Each site's quite unique in terms of the intensity of PFAS-containing foam that was used at that site, as well as meteorological, hydrological conditions. You spoke there around the flood, as well as soil conditions. So each site is quite unique in terms of how much PFAS was actually released during firefighting training, as well as how the localised soil and meteorological, hydrological conditions have affected the amount of PFAS that's migrated and how much of that source is already depleted. So I would say Rockhampton is probably middle ground amongst our sites nationally.
Thank you.
The second part of your question, yes, as Ms. Stash previously provided in her evidence, this site is actually subject to flooding, as is the broader Rockhampton Airport, as we saw yesterday. It would be reasonable that the mass of PFAS that was at the site prior to those floods would be greater than the mass that is there today. It would be reasonable to expect that PFAS has been mobilised as a result of those flooding events. Airservices, we actually did have some pre-flooding, one of the pre-flooding events. We actually had some data from the site and then a comparative data set after the flooding event. I think it would be fair to say that there was not a significant and noticeable decrease in the residual soil concentrations at the site. I think it would be reasonable to expect that some PFAS was mobilised during those flooding events. But you can see, what is in front of the committee today. We estimate that there's in the region of 140 kilos of PFAS mass still remaining at that site. So I think it would be fair to say that whilst flooding may have an impact, it has not washed all of the PFAS out. There is still a residual mass there, hence the need for the remediation that we're proposing to the committee today to remove that mass.
Thank you. I'll hand over to the Deputy and then Senator Delega.
Thank you, Chair. So, just to go on for the questions from the Chair about the flooding, when was this site first monitored for PFAS? So, did you have a baseline at some point and then be able to see where we're at before this project started?
I would have to take that specific question on notice and just find out exactly when the first investigation was done. There has been investigation work done at Rockhampton since, I think, 2010. I'll take that on notice and confirm the exact details. I think one of the important points to note is that PFAS, as we've spoken about, is very much a legacy impact. So, the firefighting foams were historically used until 2002, 2003, being 3M light water, which is what the original foam that was used, and then transitioned to another PFAS-containing foam that was regulatory approved at that time until 2010, prior to the transition into the PFAS-containing foam. The science of PFAS has evolved and has evolved rapidly. So it was not actually until 2008 that the first standardised methodology available for laboratories to detect and report consistently PFAS concentrations were available. And in actual fact, it wasn't until circa 2014 that one of the predominant PFAS compounds that was in the original 3M light water product, it wasn't until 2014, circa 2014, that was able to be reliably detected by laboratories. So typically when we look at historic monitoring data that predates that 2014 period, there is a question mark about the reliability of that data and the ability for the laboratories to repeatedly and accurately report the same concentrations.
Okay, thank you. So given the fact this is about a circa $25 million spend, how confident are you that this plan will be good value for money and actually achieve the desired outcome?
Sure, great question. So the remediation plan is actually built upon a large body of scientific data, a large body of soil sampling data that allows us to develop a three-dimensional model. That three-dimensional model allows us to predict and estimate the volume of soil and the concentrations of PFAS which that soil is impacted. That gives us the estimate, the circa 140 kilos of residual PFAS mass at the site. The remediation plan that forms the basis of our submission today indicates that the remediation work will remove circa 90%. It's slightly higher, actually, it's around 94% of that modelled mass. Obviously, removing 94% of the residual source will have consequential improvements on the amount of PFAS that's migrating from that site, be that via surface water or groundwater. So it's not possible for me to quantify the exact benefits other than to say that 94% of that mass will be removed. The remediation plan, as Ms. Peterson spoke to there, the remediation plan includes an ongoing monitoring program. So prior to the remediation works, we've actually developed a baseline of PFAS that's in the ground, we know, based on the soil sampling that's been done, as well as an estimate of how much PFAS is leaving that site on an annual basis. That gives us a pre-remediation baseline. Once the remediation work is completed, we then continue that monitoring over an extended period of time. And that gives us a quantification of how effective that remediation has been in reducing that migration of PFAS from the source area.
Oh, good, thank you. And Mrs. Peterson, earlier on, I think you said that you took part of this as voluntary. It wasn't part of an order or anything like that. So has the site reached Commonwealth standards that it's so many parts per million or whatever, so much kilos per an area, or what actually triggered this request for the remediation?
Okay, thank you for the question. I'll answer the first part. So under our environmental regulations, we are required, or we can receive through airport environmental officers, environmental remediation orders, which is what I meant by voluntary versus involuntary. Once you receive an environmental remediation order, you are required to conduct that, which is what happened at our Launceston former fire training ground. So when I spoke about voluntary, involuntary, that's what I was speaking to. In relation, though, to your question about the guidance and, you know, what has tipped us over to doing it, I'll hand over to Mr. James Comley to answer that.
Sure, thank you. So the heads of the EPA across Australia and New Zealand have published a document called the PFAS National Environmental Management Plan. And that PFAS NEMP, as it's referred to, contains a series of guideline values for human exposure as well as environmental exposure. Those guideline values are for soil, they are for water and other material, other environmental media. There are concentrations at the Rockhampton former fire training ground that are in excess of those guideline values. Those guideline values and the fact that they are in excess therefore triggers us to look into the need for remediation, the practicalities of that remediation, and develop the remediation action plan. So the remediation action plan is actually developed in collaboration with an independent assessor, a voluntary third-party Queensland contaminated land auditor who provides oversight of the need for remediation, the feasibility of remediation and the extent of remediation to ensure that the remediation plans that are in front of the committee today adhere to those national guidance documents.
Thank you. And last question, if I may, Chair. You were talking about ongoing testing to make sure that to see of the levels and whether they were going next door and everything. Has there been significant or enough consultation with neighbours to this site, and are they fully aware of exactly what's happening here?
If it's okay with the committee, you know, obviously there are some sensitivities and privacy issues and confidentiality issues around neighbours and adjacent properties. With the permission of the committee, we would ask that we take those questions in camera.
Happy to withdraw, Chair. Thank you. Okay. And no further questions from me, Chair. Thank you.
Senator Delegar.
Thanks. And following on Mr. Comley, I might ask you some more questions in camera based on the neighbouring and the consultation. And actually, yeah, no questions for me. I'll wait till in camera, mate. Thanks.
Mr. Smith, are you on the line, and do you have any questions?
Thanks, Mr. Zapier. Just one. What is Airservices doing to ensure that they are monitoring any long-term health issues among former or current ARP service workers exposed to PFAS in the course of their employment? And what do we know about the levels of PFAS in ARP employees at Rockhampton, say, compared to Oakey or Williamstown?
Thank you for the question. I will answer the first part of the question, then I'll hand over to Mr. Comley for further details. So Airservices Australia conducts a PFAS longitudinal blood health study on both current and former aviation rescue firefighters. We have been conducting that study through the University of Queensland. We fund that study, and that has been ongoing since 2013, whereby our aviation rescue firefighters are able to provide blood samples to UQ, and they then receive reports associated to how that blood, or their blood studies, what it relates to from a PFAS, as well as ongoing increases in PFAS in their blood. In relation specifically to Rockhampton, I might hand it to James. I'm not sure if we have the specific details due to the de-identified nature of the study.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously the study that's run by the University of Queensland, the Queensland Alliance of Environmental Health Science, which is a group within the University of Queensland, there are sensitivities and privacy around individual firefighters' blood test results, such that we actually don't ever get to see individuals' results. What we do see, however, is an aggregated pool of individuals' results. I think it would be fair to say that there is no indication that the concentrations of PFAS in the blood of our firefighters at Rockhampton, as well as nationally, there's no indication that there is a material ongoing exposure to our staff from the PFAS concentrations residual that remains at our fire training grounds and or fire stations. That PFAS being attributable to Airservices.
David, did you have any other questions?
We just, as a brief follow-up, my understanding is that Airservices supports ongoing assessment of ARP staff or former ARP staff in this regard. Is this the case?
Mr. Comley, are you able to?
I'm sorry, I didn't really get the question. Sorry.
I thought Mr. Smith asked that he was of the view that Airservices Australia conduct ongoing assessments of staff members. I thought he said.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah.
That is correct. That is through our PFAS longitudinal blood study that we do through the University of Queensland. So that has commenced as of 2013 and continues to this day.
Can I perhaps just interrupt on this, David, and just ask this question then? If you've been conducting those studies since 2013, has there been any results that are of interest that you can share with the committee?
So the result from, as Ms Peterson said, there was the initial round of the longitudinal blood study was conducted 2013-2014. A supplementary round was conducted 2018-2019, and we're just in the recruitment phase at the moment for the next round of the longitudinal study. Both the 2013-2014 and the 2018-2019, the reports from both of those rounds of studies are publicly available. They're available on the University of Queensland website. The report from the 2020 round of studies, so the 2018-2019 samples, and then reported in 2020. The report actually split, and there were in the region of 800 current at that time and former firefighters that were part of the study. The report in the data analysis actually split the firefighter cohort into two groups. Those who started before 2013 and those who started after 2013. 2013 being a bit of a nominal year around the transition from PFAS-containing foam. Yep. And what the report found was that amongst those individuals who, of our staff, who had exposure to the old foams, whilst their individual blood PFAS concentrations were very variable, they were on average elevated when compared to the Australian population. That's indicative of an exposure that happened historically. Amongst those individuals who started service with Airservices after the phase out of the PFAS containing foams, their blood concentrations were on average similar to the average Australian population. So that tells us that the transition from the PFAS containing foams to the non-PFAS containing foam that we use today was successful in breaking that exposure pathway. It also tells us that the administrative controls, PPE and things like that, are effective in breaking that potential exposure pathway to residual impacts that remain at our sites today. I think it's really important that the primary exposure pathway, that the committee is aware that the primary exposure pathway for PFAS is via ingestion. So it's dirty hands or drinking PFAS impacted drinking water, as an example. That is the primary, all of which are exposure pathways that can be fairly readily and fairly easily broken. And that's clearly evident in the longitudinal blood studies as it relates to PFAS at and is attributable to our sites.
Thank you. David, does that answer your question?
It's a good response, Chair. I'm happy to respond.
Do you have any other questions that you...
No, Chair.
Okay. Can I just go back to the process that will be used to remediate the site? And I understand that some of the material or some of the earth will be taken away and possibly interstate to a burning facility. Firstly, how much of the soil do you expect to be taken away? And for the benefit of anyone listening and to have it on the record, what happens to the material once it's taken to the burning facility?
Sure. So I think the first point of clarity is that the entire volume of remediated soil that's excavated, so in the region of 8,700 cubic metres, all of that material will be taken from the site.
All to the site where it'll be burnt?
No, all of that material will be taken from the site and lawfully disposed. There are a range of disposal options dependent upon the concentration of PFAS in that soil, number one, and also the concentration, the amount of PFAS that leaches from that soil, that is able to be freed from that soil in water. Now, there's a standardised laboratory test that is done on soil that effectively a portion of soil is put into a liquid matrix and then that liquid is tumbled, and that essentially allows an estimate of the amount of PFAS that's leachable. So here in Queensland, there are a number of landfills that can accept PFAS impacted material up to certain thresholds of both total PFAS concentrations, that's in the soil, as well as the amount of PFAS that can leach, the leachable concentrations. So we estimate that somewhere in the region of 50% of this soil that's excavated has lower levels of PFAS that can be accepted lawfully by landfills here in Queensland without any further treatment. Probably 45% of the soil volume will require some post-excavation treatment to stabilise that material and to actually reduce that leachable concentration of PFAS such that it can be lawfully accepted by receiving landfills. And then there's a smaller volume of material, roughly 5%, we think roughly 200 to 300 cubic metres of material, where the only viable option in Australia at present is thermal destruction of that material, and that material will be sent down to Melbourne via approved interstate transport for thermal destruction. And effectively that thermal destruction irrevocably breaks the PFAS molecules themselves and destroys that PFAS.
Okay. My other question is, we heard from one landowner earlier on today, who owns the land that it abuts the area in question that could be at risk of contamination, other than the land owner that we heard from today?
So respectfully, perhaps if we can take the questions on, some of those questions on private property on notice, in camera. The site itself, the fire training ground, is part of Rockhampton Regional Council property, so it's airport property land. The site itself, as we saw yesterday, is actually landside, so it's beyond the operational airside, landside boundary for the airport. And it's my understanding that that land extends down to the midpoint of Lion Creek, which is adjacent to, so council land extends to the midpoint of Lion Creek. It's abutted on the other side then by private property.
Okay. And I've got other questions, but I think they all relate to questions that will be asked in the in-camera meeting. My last question is this one then. My understanding, and based on your briefing yesterday, was that you've done the remediation at the Launceston site in Tasmania. At the time that you did the assessment there for that site, and I don't have the stats in front of me, did the cost of the remediation come above or below what was projected at the time that you got Public Works approval?
So the works at Launceston was completed within the budget that was provided for Public Works Committee, and I think, I don't know, Mr. Page, who's the project director on the...
Yeah, so we came in about 5% under budget.
And was there anything from that project that we can learn from, given that I assume that was the first major remediation project you did?
Yes, correct.
Did that project in any way impact on what is going to be done here at Rockhampton, or what is proposed to be done?
I can speak to that. The work that was done at Rockhampton was somewhat different. It obviously has the same objectives, remediating a residual legacy PFAS source with the objective of reducing the amount of PFAS that's migrating from that source. So the objectives were the same. The soil volumes at Launceston were actually slightly larger than here at Rockhampton. The remedial approach that was chosen at Rockhampton was the soil that was excavated was treated and stabilised, as I spoke to previously here for Rockhampton, and was actually reinstated in the excavation. What we're proposing here at Rockhampton is that the soil, once excavated, is actually lawfully disposed off airport. And the important reason why there is that difference is that Launceston, the former fire training ground at Launceston, is several hundred metres above sea level. It's metres and metres away from surface water bodies. Yep. Groundwater there is I think 6 or 7 metres below the remediation extent. As Ms. Stash previously has spoken about, the site at Rockhampton is subject to flooding. The risk associated with a treatment and reinstatement of that material at Rockhampton, our consultants in collaboration with our Queensland accredited contaminated land auditor, they run through a remedial options assessment that looks through all of these options and pairwise compares the suitability, the feasibility, as well as the longevity of different remedial approaches. And for Rockhampton, the preferred remedial option was that excavation and off-airport disposal.
Okay. Is the remediation proposed at Rockhampton one of a number of other remediations that are going to take place? And if so, why was Rockhampton chosen as the next one in line?
Great question. So Airservices has a national PFAS management program that's looking at 18 aerodromes around Australia, where Airservices, since our inception in 1995, has provided, and in providing aviation rescue firefighting services, has used PFAS containment foams. Obviously, we've spoken about Launceston. We're here talking to you today about Rockhampton. It is on the public record that Airservices has finalised remediation plans for Canberra, 2 of our sites at Canberra. I think it would be fair to anticipate that Launceston, Rockhampton, Canberra, there will be other airports that we will be looking to undertake remediation for.
Yeah, but is Rockhampton is the work at Rockhampton being scheduled now because it is considered to be more important than the other airports, or is it simply just a process of working through?
It's largely a process of working through chronologically and working through the sites. One of the considerations is obviously the service that we provide to the safety of the travelling public does require a number of training grounds and training facilities. Yeah. Rockhampton, similar to Launceston, the former fire training grounds at both of those sites have been disused for a number of years. They are, in the case of Rockhampton, off-airport land, on airport land, but outside of airport operational areas, and such it allows us to go and do the remediation work without impacting both our ability to provide the critical services that we provide, the aviation rescue firefighting, as well as not having an impact on the actual aerodrome operations themselves.
Okay. Look, I think I don't have any other questions. I'll just check again with my colleagues.
Fine, thank you, Chair.
Just going to ask about with the soil and everything that's being removed. it's not all of the soil that's being removed, is it? There's going to be some that's going to be left over. The local community can be confident that that remaining soil that's going to be left on the soil, reused at the site, is going to be safe for the future, and can they have confidence in your testing that you'll do for years to come potentially with that it will remain safe?
Yeah, great question. So what's known as the remedial criteria, which is the dig, don't dig decision point. The remedial criteria for this site that's been chosen is the applicable guideline for the intended land use, long-term land use for that site, such that the concentrations in the lower level PFAS impacted material, that, as you rightly say, some will be reused to backfill the excavation. Those concentrations are below the guidance concentrations for the applicable land use.
Great, thank you.
If I may, I actually think, I don't know whether this is appropriate to do it now, but I think I may have actually misspoken when I was talking about the longitudinal blood study. I think I spoke about 2 cohorts pre and post to 2013. I actually believe it's 2005 were those 2 cohorts.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's worth correcting now or...
No, it is, Mr. Comley, that's fine, and I appreciate the correction. All right, well, I thank you for your attendance here today. If the committee has any further questions, we might send them to you so you can put them in writing, but you'll also be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence to the committee today, and if you feel you need to make any corrections, again, please advise the Secretariat. With that, I declare this public hearing closed. We'll have a few minutes of break, and then we'll go into the in-camera hearing.
As you're aware, we have a